Hello there and welcome to Laurence Plays Factorio Planetary Pioneers, and we've made it out to a new planet. Yes, we've landed on the rather rubbish world of Fulgora. And Fulgora's thing is that you have these patches of scrap that you can mine with your normal mining drills, and you generate large quantities of this. This is scrap. And that scrap can then be fed into recyclers, which are a new machine that you develop on Fulgora, and that produces an output of all kinds of random stuff. And if we take a look at this in the Factoriopedia, then we can see that one scrap has a chance of turning into any of these things. There are some things that are relatively likely, that's a 20% chance of getting an iron gear wheel or a wooden gear wheel out, and then you've got some other things that are lower chances, like solid fuel, concrete, yada yada yada, all the way down the list there. All of these things are then being fed up a belt up the middle here, and through a sorting system, which takes out each individual item, so solid fuel goes off here, steel goes off here, and so on and so on. All of those are then passed off down a belt, and one of the things we've done here, which I think is quite clever, and I didn't do in my previous run, is that all of those things are then being dumped straight into a red chest, and there's a couple of slots available in each one. So we can have a couple of stacks stored up of each of these things available for the logistics network to take off to wherever it's required. That's being put in by an inserter that's taking off an underground belt here, so anything that isn't needed can just flow straight through, like you can see this ice doing at the moment, or this solid fuel here. That can carry on further down the belt and be taken off to wherever it's needed. And then if it's completely backed up, like this stone belt here is, well, if we follow this one back to here, you can see there's a priority splitter here. So what the high priority side goes into this underground belt that goes under here, and then is fed off down to the rest of the system. But the low priority side then goes into another recycler. And if you recycle something like stone that doesn't really have any components, then there's a 75% chance it'll get destroyed and a 25% chance you'll get it back. So you can see stone is being put in here, and then about a quarter of the stone is getting brought out of the bottom here and passed around and going back through the system. So that stone will just eventually be recycled away to nothing. Other things, though, are a little bit more interesting. So for example, if we recycle wooden gears up here, then these will, again, there's only a 25% chance of actually getting the output. But when they do get recycled, there's a piece of lumber that came out of that. Everything gets turned into whatever the components that would have been required to make it. Up here, for example, we've got blue circuits going in. They're being recycled, and you can see green circuits and sometimes red circuits pouring out here. And then, again, going down the belts down here to go around the system. Those things can then be fed further up. So the green circuits, for example, are coming up along here. And in order to keep these belts as close together as possible, we've got recyclers on both sides, because each recycler is too high. So if we have one on this side and one on the other side, then between them we can fit enough recyclers in to process all of the different things that are going down the belts over here. So on the other side you've got all of the other machines. So in this case up here we've got green circuits that are coming from recycled blue circuits coming in along here, and they're being fed along the belt here and off that way if they're needed, or if they're not needed because the belt's full, which it is, then they're being passed through here and they're going into this machine, which then turns them into the components for a green circuit, which is iron and copper cables, which then go back round to the bottom here and then go up to be sorted out again. The downside of this system is that this belt down here at the bottom gets a bit full, and that limits the amount of throughput you can get, which is potentially a problem, but hopefully isn't going to be too serious a problem. We'll see how that goes as we get on further into the game. We may need to do a little bit of tweaking of the design for this, but we'll see how it goes, as I say. And then as we go further and further up here, you've got more and more of the ingredients until we've got at the top, you can see that we've got some unlabeled splitters up here. And that's because by the time we got up to this point, we'd run out of things we were getting through from the scrap recycling, and then the recycling of all the bits and pieces that come from that. And so that was it. That was our lot, and so the rest is spare. Now you never know. We may find we end up recycling something later for some strange reason. Maybe we'll find an upgraded scrap processing system or something like that, which means we get more different things out of it. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But at the moment, this is all of the different things that are coming through from our scrap system, and it's working quite nicely. Putting this together has, of course, been a team effort, as are most things in our game. I believe Mark put in the mining down here. I put in the recycling system in here, and then Sophia was in charge of all of this sorting thing in here. So I think Sophia got the most complicated task out of those. The rest was all fairly very easy. We're quite familiar with the idea of putting down mining drills and putting down a row of machines to process a thing. So that was all quite straightforward. But now as I say, we've got a nice steady supply of stuff coming through, and that will hopefully keep the factory happy. And later on, Sophia came in and upgraded this scrap processing by putting in a green belt here instead of a blue belt, which meant we were able to get a bit more coming through. And then I think we've probably upgraded, yes, we've got green belts running all the way through here as well to maximise throughput. It's not really fast enough, but, it's a good start. Saphir also notes that in order to get this system running as nicely as possible, he's put in some additional recycling for difficult products, and by difficult we mean the ones that come out at a higher rate than everything else. So these are ones that are producing 20% chance of producing that thing. So for example, you can see here the iron gears being brought out and dumped straight into a machine here, which is then beaconed to make it run even faster as it produces as it turns that into iron plates. Similarly up here, the steel is being destroyed as quickly as possible, and the wooden gears are also being destroyed quite quickly as well, because those are things that we get a lot more of those out than we do of the other things, and we also don't really need them in particularly large quantities, particularly not in the state that they're coming out from here in. Some of the lumber might be useful, the iron is certainly useful, but the actual gears and the wooden gears, not so much. Those of you who've played vanilla will be a little bit surprised to see the wooden gears in here. I suspect this is a modification that's been made because of the whole lignuminous wooden belts and yada 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 system. And so because if you're going to start wanting to make belts on this planet, you're going to need a supply of wood, this is a good way of doing it. I think there is another mod available that has some sort of little tree things growing on this planet. We don't seem to have that one. I don't know whether that's because we didn't set up one of our mods properly or some sort of mistake was made. I don't know exactly, but it's a little bit funny. I'm not sure exactly why we don't have that. Before we even got started, we did do a little bit of scouting. Okay, we did quite a lot of scouting in an attempt to find a decently sized island that we wanted to settle on. And we picked this one here because it was the biggest one we found, and it's got another island that's. I don't know whether that counts as a separate island. I mean, it isn't a separate island because they're actually joined, but it feels like it's almost a separate island because it's only just joined. And then there's this one over here, which is just in range for long pylons going across there. So this is enabled us to put in even more accumulators over here. Because Fulgora has a weird power system. Now, anyone who's watched my vanilla run through will already be familiar with this, but I'm going to go over it fairly quickly anyway. Now, you might notice there is basically a constant lightning storm going on at the moment, and that's because it's nighttime at the moment. And during the night on Fulgora, you get attacked by lightning storms, or at least lightning storms happen. And so you have to put down these lightning rods, and those will protect. As you can see, there's a blue area highlighted there, and that's the area that is protected by the lightning rods that we put down. However, when lightning hits a lightning rod, it doesn't just disappear, it gets turned into electricity that you can then pass through and store in accumulators, and then you can use that electricity to power your factory. And also, you can use, because you're storing loads of it in accumulators, you can use it to power your factory during the day as well. And if we have a look at our power stats over the last few in-game days, you can see that we're getting these big spikes here of production, and that's from the lightning rods as we're producing power, as they're getting struck by lightning overnight, and that's getting dumped very, very quickly into the accumulators, charging them up. They're then being kept full for the rest of the night, and then during the day they gradually discharge as the factory uses up some of the power, until the next night happens when they get charged back up again. And at the moment we seem to be using about half of the power we're generating. There was a bit of a problem back here where we're using nearly all of it, but we've clearly done some expansion since then. And if we zoom back in again, you can see that we're using, yes, about half of the power. It's dropping from about 15 to about 7.7. That's close enough to half. We're in a pretty good position for electricity at the moment. Now the factory will almost certainly expand, and we'll have to put out more lightning rods and more accumulators, but that's not a serious problem because we do have a lot of space available on this island, and we can just completely fill this one up with accumulators and consider this one to be the power supply for the factory. We've also got a lot down here as well, as you can see. We may mess around with getting some of this scrap as well from this planet, from this island, or this area of this island, or we may use something, slightly different method. As you can see, we've got a railway line coming in here. That's coming from an island over here that has a 23 million patch of scrap on it, which is, that's quite a lot of scrap, so that's going to keep us going for a while. And there's some mining happening here, and it's filled up a train already, but there's nowhere for the train to go, so it's just sat there, which is fine. Because these islands are quite a long way apart though, there's no way to bring power from over here to over here. You can't jump the pylons across these sort of distances, they're just too far. So we've got a separate power generation system on this island, which is again exactly the same. We've got the lightning rods, we've got to connect to some accumulators, and that's enough to keep this system happy and keep it running. The interesting thing about the scrap distribution on Fulgora is that the big islands tend to not have very much. So this one actually has 827,000. That feels like quite a lot for a big island. Whereas this one over here, that's actually quite tiny, has 23 million. So this one is going to get us going. It's going to be plenty to get us started, and we're going to chug through this as we get going. But then once we start using a lot more of it, and once we want to leave the planet and just have something that's going to keep ticking over and running happily all by itself, then we're going to want to use these big patches, 23 million here, another 23 million here, 21 million down here. We're not going to bother with the 65 or 300,000 that's on this island. or the 800,000, 660,000, and so on the bigger islands. So this one is really quite unusual. This is a really, really good island because it's massive, but then this one I think is actually meant to be a separate island because it's got so much scrap on it. I feel that the game has got a little bit confused and accidentally joined these two islands together. So we've got quite lucky here, I think. As usual, all of the power supply systems have been set up by Tristan. I say as usual, I feel like he's done quite a lot of that in this game because he kept expanding the solar fields on Cubium while we were getting established out here. And it looks like he was doing the same out on Igris as well, and maybe some of the other planets as well. So yes, apparently in the last run, the trains were Tristan's speciality. This time it seems to be power generation. That's the thing he goes out and does. I think that might just be because he's been noticing when it's been running low and therefore going out and expanding it quite a lot. As part of that, he's also given us logistics network coverage over the entire area, so everything is just nice and easy to build, and we don't have to worry about that too much. And so, now that we've got this supply of miscellanea coming through, we've got all the bits and pieces we may or may not want trickling along the bus over here, well, we now have to do something useful with them. So, it's time to start thinking about the electromagnetic science packs, the pink science, the ones that are made on Fulgora. And you get a nice new resource on Fulgora that we've not seen anywhere else, and that's this stuff, the holmium ore. And that can be brought up along here into these machines where it gets crushed down because we're playing with a load of mods that mean you have to crush absolutely everything before you can do anything with it. We're then bringing that along here as the powdered stuff, and that, along with some sand that comes from crushing stone, allows us to make holmium solution. We also need some water as well, and that comes from melting ice, so that's fairly easy. All of these things are pretty easy. They're just get something from the scrap recycling and then process it once more. So you're crushing stone to make sand, you're crushing holmium ore to make holmium powder, and you're melting ice to make water. That can then be turned into the holmium solution, which goes into the pipes along here. And in this particular case, we can put it into this machine, which makes holmium plates. Well, it makes hot holmium plates out of it because we've got that mod as well. But that is just turning the holmium solution into holmium plates, which can then be fed out. And we've got your standard cooling system here where it gets put into the box until it's cool, and then an inserter brings it out, puts it onto the belt. And then we're putting some into the logistics system as well because there's some things around here that require that. From this, we're also able to start making the, the electrolyte, which is more sand and some heavy oil and some holmium solution. So we talked about the holmium solution, that's easy. We talked about sand, that was easy. And heavy oil is really, really easy because all of these oceans on Fulgora are just oceans of heavy oil. So it's, you pump it out of the ocean with an offshore pump like this, you pass it up a pipe, and boom, you've got heavy oil. Really, really easy. So making the electrolytes, not too bad as long as you've got a nice steady supply of the holmium solution coming through. That's probably going to be the hardest part. Because I did notice as I was looking at this, we don't have an enormous amount of holmium ore down here. The belt, unlike all of the others, the belt has not fed back all the way along to wherever and started recycling it. This is the thing that is sort of, I won't say limiting us at the moment because there is quite a lot of it available, but it is the thing we have the least of. And so once again, this was a team effort. Tristan brought in the holmium and did all the crushing of it and the sand, and then he made the holmium solution. Mark came along to make that into electrolytes. And then I took those products over to here and started making some of the actual components for the science packs, because these are all just sort of basic resources at this point, I guess. They've taken a fair amount of processing, but they're still relatively basic. And that allowed me to start making the superconductors. So that's bringing in copper plate and plastic and holmium plate. So the holmium plate was being made by Tristan out of the holmium solution. The light oil was made by Mark, and I'm not sure where that's down here. Yes, we have a cracking area down here. And this, and I mean that in both the Yorkshire way and the actual English way. So we're bringing in the ice and doing the melting. So that's where we're getting the water from. And that allows us to take in some of that heavy oil that's being pulled out of the oceans and turn it into light oil. Great. And then presumably if we wanted to, we could crack that down further and turn it into petroleum gas. But we don't seem to need any of that, at least at the moment. So we've got the light oil coming through here. Great, so that's that one. The plastic comes out of recycling over here. I think that probably comes from recycling red circuits. There may be other places it comes from as well. Although from a quick glance over here, I can't see any. So I suspect all of our plastic is actually genuinely coming out of red circuit recycling. But that doesn't seem to be a problem. We do seem to have a lot of it available here. So that's brought over, as I say, then we're made into superconductors. Copper is an interesting one. That comes from a number of different places. So we don't get any from the actual scrap recycling itself. However, we can recycle the electrical cables that come out, and we get some from the batteries, and potentially, if we go all the way down to green circuits and recycle those, then we can get some more copper out of those as well. And we do seem to have a lot of green circuits. So we've got quite a few places where copper is being made. We've got a nice healthy supply of that. And so that meant I was able to make superconductors, which could be passed over to here where I can make supercapacitors. And that's a similar sort of thing. We're bringing in batteries that come straight out of the scrap. We're bringing in green circuits, which come from recycling red or blue circuits. We're bringing in holmium plate, which are being made from the holmium ore. We're using the superconductors that I made in the previous step, and we're using the electrolyte that Mark made. And that allows us to make supercapacitors. So that's fairly easy. All of the input ingredients here seem to be hanging on quite nicely. We've got plenty of all of those. So that's just working very, very nicely. And that means those can then be brought over to here, where we're making the actual science packs. And so, because we've been to Igris and to Cubium, we've set this up to start producing science packs in the best way we possibly can. So, down here, we've got a couple of machines making the electromagnetic science packs the enhanced way, the Igrian way, and that means we get the plus 150% productivity bonus, and then an extra 6% for putting a productivity module in there. But in order to do so, we need to feed in a stream of magic fluid, which we seem to have. We are, however, currently missing supercapacitors, because this insert has been turned off, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So these machines are basically fine, they're working off those. And then up here, we've got the two machines doing the Cubium style recipe, which gets us an extra productivity bonus by giving us more output. So you can see there, we've got basically the same inputs as we had with the other system. But if we look down here, where this one makes 1 EM science pack, this one makes 4 of them, although it does use slightly more electrolyte to do so, but that's all. However, I think it uses more electrolyte because it doesn't use the holmium solution, and I think that's because we got to a point where there just aren't any more inputs available on this machine, so it got a little bit silly. I don't know why it's not being fed in here. Maybe the machine doesn't support that or something. Maybe it's only actually got 3 inputs despite appearances. But anyway, this means we've now got the really, really efficient way of making those science packs, which means every time the machine runs, instead of getting 2.5, we get 10 of them, which is an enormous increase. So that's going to be really, really powerful. But not only does it require magic fluid, it also requires dream concentrate and energized microcubes. And so we've got a system here that will hopefully allow us to produce those things. So over here we've got a system which this is very, very similar to the one we had on Cubium, where we put the dull microcubes in here and then we can just wait for them to be re-energized. And that's going to take a while. We've got some over here that still have 13 minutes left on them, so we won't sit around and wait for that to happen, because that is going to be rather a long time for those to re-energize. But then they will eventually be passed out onto this belt and brought around here, where some of them will be fed into these machines in order to make large quantities of jelly. The jelly will then sit on here until it decomposes and turns into dreams. The dreams can then be dissolved in water here to make the liquid dreams, which can then be concentrated in these chemical plants to make the concentrated dreams. Lovely. And that we can then store in a tank over here. We've got loads of that. The tank is completely full, so that's going really, really well, as you can tell. And that's why this over here we've got the chest. We've got a chest full of dreams, and I was going to say the machine not running over here, but actually it seems to be all right. We just don't have water coming in quite quickly enough. That's the limiting factor. It's a bizarre limiting factor, but okay. We don't have enough water, but we do have a lot of dream concentrate here, so that's enough to keep this running. The problem is this has used up all of the grey cubes that we had available, and so the system has shut down and gone to sleep. We don't have any blue cubes available for these machines in order for them to use them as a catalyst in order to then pass them around and yada yada yada. So we need to get a lot more cubes on this planet in order to allow this to keep going. Or, as the hint in the text I've written in over here says, we need to start using all the solid fuel that comes out of the scrap recycling, all of this stuff, not just to make rocket fuel, but also to start re-energizing the microcubes. Now, I think the rocket fuel needs to be a priority because we need that more urgently. However, any left over can then be used to reawaken the cubes over here and mean we don't have quite so much waiting going on around here. The reason that these machines aren't running is because we have a cable connected to the tank up here, and we're telling these inserters to only run when we have a shortage of dream concentrate. Now, that seemed like a good idea at the time because we had some cubes going around here, so these machines had their cubes, and it was the dream concentrate we were short of. Now, not such a great thing because it means they're deactivated, simply because these machines don't have the cubes to keep them running. Now, the fix for this is to bring in more cubes so the system runs constantly, as I said, and then the theory is that eventually we'll have so many of the EM science packs made, so many being made by these machines up here, that will completely fill the belt up, will fill the rockets up, will fill the belt up, and then these machines will stop running because these will be providing enough to keep everything happy. We may need to do some shenaniganery to get that to work nicely, but that's the theory we're going for, and I'm cautiously optimistic it should start working, at least once we have enough inputs. At least once we have enough of the cubes here. And we do have the one of the ships, I'm not quite sure which one it is that's doing the transport. It might be the Richard Dean Anderson, that seems to be stopped at Cubium at the moment. But we've got one of the ships that is flying out, collecting cubes, and then we can tell it to bring them over here and drop them off. It's a little bit of a manual process dealing with the cubes, but it's one that we don't need to do often enough for it to really matter that it's so manual. And yeah, so making EM science packs, well, it requires the supercapacitors. We've talked about those. It requires cubes. I've talked about those in quite a lot of detail. Electrolyte we've talked about. Dream concentrate we've talked about. Magic fluid we've talked about that in the past. That's one where Mark has set up a system to bring that in from Igris. So it's being dropped into the landing pad over here by the ship as it comes back, as it does its rounds. Then it goes down the belt over here, and well, you can see we've got plenty of it available at the moment. And then it goes into a machine over here, unboxes it or unbarrels it rather, puts that into the pipe, and you can see we've got plenty in the pipe, and then we'll drop the empties back onto here where they go down to a rocket silo down here, which will take them back up to the ship to be taken back to Igris to be refilled, because making these barrels is quite expensive. We don't want to lose them, but we do need to have a steady supply of magic fluid being brought over here. The other thing that's required for EM science packs is accumulators. So this was given to Tristan, and I think somebody decided to try and wind me up a little bit. And so the accumulators are, for various crazy reasons, being brought in by Logistics Bot to this chest, where they're then put onto a belt and fed in over here. If I do a search for them, we can see that they're being made in a number of different places. 1, 2, 3. We've got 5 machines scattered around this island here. Tristan says he's made 6 of them. I think he may be trying the old release 3 pigs with the numbers 1, 2 and 4 written on them trick. Because according to the search, there only seems to be 5. So I don't know. So Tristan may be lying to me, or he may just be trying to wind me up. But anyway, so accumulators are a thing that we do need in large quantities for building out all of this power production or power storage to keep the lightning in a bottle. But we also need it for the science packs. So yeah, he's just scattered them to the 4 winds. They've got their components being brought out by Bot. They've got the actual accumulators being taken away by Bot. I don't know why this one isn't running. Oh, it's because there's more than 100 available in the logistics network. Fine, that makes kind of sense. And yeah, this will supply them to wherever they're needed, kind of, I guess. We do have an extension to the bot Maul over here, where we're making all of the bits and pieces we need for various things. So, for example, we're making lightning rods. We've got quite a lot of things bringing in normal concrete and pulverising it to make refined concrete, which we need for our rocket silos. We're making recyclers, we're making various things like pipes and other stuff that we just need on this planet in order to make bits and pieces. Most things are being brought in and dropped off from the Lime, because that's our seeding ship. It brings over enormous quantities of just everything we could possibly want to start out on a planet, except for rocket silos, because they're too big and heavy to launch in a rocket, which kind of makes sense. And then the few extra things that we haven't got coming from there, we're making on the planet, and so we've got those available. Sophia has said he expanded my concrete production over here because I had 1 or 2, I think I had 2 machines here making the concrete slurry out of concrete and water, and he reckoned that wasn't enough, so he's increased it a bit more over here. Mark's put in some lube production up here so we can make the electric motors. Again, I think are needed. Yes, they're required for making the rocket silos. And then most importantly, most excitingly, we've got electromagnetic plants being made down here, and these are the new building for Fulgora. You need them for a lot of the science pack production stuff over here, so you can see we're using them to make the supercapacitors and the superconductors, and also to make the electrolyte as well. So they're required, absolutely required for those. And in a normal game, they'd be required for actually making the science packs as well, but we've switched over to the science enhancer machines because they're just straight up better, even better. And the EM plants are fantastic because they have a productivity bonus of 50%. So this means you can use them for making circuits and then basically anything electronicsy. And you get that plus 50% productivity bonus. That means you need a lot fewer inputs. They also run quite a bit faster than the assembly machines as well, so that makes them even better. Although they are bigger, so you could probably get just as much output per square with assembly machines as you could with EM plants. But it's nice to have fewer machines and have them running a bit faster. And it makes it cheaper when you start to module them as well. So those have gone everywhere. We're going to start exporting these to other planets at some point in the near future, I'm sure, because we're going to start wanting all of those outputs to go over there. And so that got the whole system up and running. Once we got the science packs actually being produced, we then needed to start working out where the limiting factors were and what was preventing them from being produced at the rate we wanted to produce them at. Now clearly at the moment it's the cubes, but previously we weren't making enough of the supercapacitors or the superconductors, and I think we might have had to expand the electrolyte and the holmium solution as well, because those are all the ingredients that go into it. And those were all quite easy to expand because it was just putting in more and more machines to make those parts. However, a slightly more interesting one was the green circuits. So green circuits, as you know, are being produced from recycling red circuits and blue circuits over here, and that was producing some, But at the time, it wasn't enough, and I suspect once we start making science packs again, this will all disappear quite quickly, and we'll wish we hadn't been recycling quite so much of it. And so, because we didn't have enough, I expanded out over here to put in some additional machines to make them, and as you can see, we've used the EM plants, those nice new shiny machines, to make sure we get out as many as we possibly can. And these are running using the copper cable that comes out of the recycling. So that comes out of from the scrap, ready to be turned directly into the electronic circuits. But the iron comes out in the form of iron gear, so that has to be recycled once before it's ready to start being made into electronic circuits. So it's kind of the other way around compared to making these things on Norvis, where you have your iron would come straight out of your smelters, and your copper cable would require an extra step of processing to turn it from copper into cable. And to take a minor sort of side note, that's kind of how Fulgora is. Everything is backwards, as I think Mike described it that way, as being sort of all the production chains run in reverse. Because you start off with scrap, which gets turned into complicated resources, which you can then simplify using the recyclers. So yeah, it's kind of backwards. Anyway, over here I started making some more green circuits here, and that was working quite nicely. And then Sophia came along and upgraded that by putting in some additional machines over here to make more copper cables, because we're ripping through them, and then the copper cables became the limiting factor. And I didn't realise at the time actually just how much copper comes out of recycling the batteries and the low density structures as well. So we're getting quite a lot of copper out from that, and that means we can then make a load more cable to make more circuits and keep everything happy and everything running. So it's working well. I'm generally pleased with how well things are going over here. The final part, I guess, is getting these science packs taken away from the planet to go over to Norvis, where they're going to be used. And so we've got the fairly standard rocket silos over here, and those take low density structures, blue circuits and rocket fuel. Now the first two are very, very easy because they come out of the scrap processing. It's only 2% and 1%, but we're processing a lot of scrap, so we're getting quite a lot of those out. And then the rocket fuel is actually very, very easy as well, because as we looked at over here, we can pump heavy oil straight out of the oceans. That heavy oil can be turned into solid fuel cubes, and we don't care that the solid fuel recipe is the least efficient, because the heavy oil is free, so we can make loads of that. We'll turn those into the cubes, and then we can also then crack it down over here into the light oil, which enables us to make the rocket fuel, which we can then pass on over here to actually fill up the rockets. And so we've got a rocket silo here for taking away the pink science, we've got a rocket silo here for taking away the empty heavy barrels, and then we've got another two down here, which, well, this one's been earmarked for launching recyclers. Maybe this one's going to be doing EM plants, and then anything else that we decide we want to export from this planet can be put in additional silos over here. I imagine we'll probably want another one over here for taking science packs away, and in fact you can see that we've got some of the infrastructure around here. I've got a belt coming down here, it's going in the wrong direction, we've got a belt in, we've got some inserters in the box, so yes, we're clearly going to put in another one of these in here so that the science can be taken out a bit more quickly. And then everything else is just build it up as we need it. Oh look, we've got cubes now, so now you can see these machines are kicked in because we've got all the resources they need. The cubes are being put into there to get them running, make them happy, and then we've got all the other resources being brought in one way or another, and so now we have a happy stream of EM science packs coming out and going into the rocket. So that's working nicely. This is what we like to see. And then over here we've got jelly being produced as well, because once again we've got some cubes available. That's being pumped. So that's being pumped through here. We're making jelly in a slightly more efficient way over here, where you take in cubes and also jelly. However, I note that it's broken because the dreams are not being taken out after spoiling, so we'll have to fix that. But we are still getting some jelly through, and that's being passed up to here, where it can spoil down, turn into more dreams, and we'll keep the whole system going. So I think that's everything about Fulgora for today. Thank you very much for watching. Well, please make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next video, where I'll talk about some of our thoughts about this planet and how we reckon things have gone over here on this weird and wonderful new place. If you fancy giving the mod pack a try yourself, then you can grab the Planetary Pioneers mod from the Factorio mod portal. And if you want to watch us playing it, then come along on Monday for the next stream, where we should be carrying on with Fulgora, getting it finished off, and then maybe thinking about going off to another planet, or maybe going out and putting in some more dream-related science production on some other planets as well. I should be back on Wednesday as well. I should be playing some more Foundry, building more robots, making more blast furnaces, that sort of thing. And videos will be coming out every Thursday and Friday. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.